Hello, everyone. Here is Martin from Crypto Valley Association in Zug, Switzerland. I'm very happy to have our friends Maja, Jalak, and Oam here with us to discuss new developments and their ideas about investing in blockchain venture. I just do a quick introduction. I start with Maja. Maja, she's managing director of OGroup, which is based in New York. And OGroup is focusing, as I've seen, on the governance of legacy system and decentralized open protocol, focusing also on artificial intelligence, blockchain, machine learning. Previously, Maja has been innovation officer at Emerging Tech Group, GE Digital, and Maja also helped design Future of Work Group. I'm very happy to have you here and that you took a break now from your travels and join us for this meeting. I'm also welcoming Jalak, founding partner of Future Perfect Venture, with a very impressive CV I've seen. I can't list all you have done in your life. I think almost one life is too short for what you have done. I think you are focusing obviously also on blockchain technology, early stage VC, decentralized technologies. And I have seen also that you are very focused on diversity investments. Many of your portfolio company have a diversity angle. You have been previously director of mobile investment at Omidia Network, a philanthropic capitalist fund, co-founded by one of the founders of eBay. And I've also seen that you have invested all over the world and especially also in Africa. And you have also been a senior vice president of the New York City Investment Fund previously a few years ago. And then we have Oam from Morgan Creek Digital. Morgan Creek Digital is a hedge fund backed by Morgan Creek Capital. You're specialized in the fields of digital asset management, financial service, and venture capitalists. So I think, I mean, you, as I have seen, Maja, Jalak, you are very early stage in your investments. Oam, I think you are more investment into coins. Maybe explain a bit. Start with Oam. Tell me
Sure,
what.
sure. Yeah. No, so no, we're kind of a classic, early to mid stage venture shop, right? I mean, actually, contrary to popular belief, we kind of a significant amount of our focus is actually on the early stage to mid stage venture side, and we're not actively trading tokens or things like that, at least as of now, and nor have we done that ever, to be honest with you. So.
Mm-hmm. So maybe also Maja, tell me why, and Jalak, why did you invest in blockchain technology? What is your thesis? Why do you think that's a good place to be?
Jalak, you want to go or I'll go? It doesn't matter. We're friends, so we know each other. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. Sure. So I've been, you've already dated me, Martin, so I can go all in. And so I invested for Intel in the late 90s out in Silicon Valley. I was a tech and telecom investment banker in the mid 90s. And so saw the Netscape IPO happen in 95. And about 8 years ago, I thought, we were just primed for a more global technology kind of revolution, not just evolution, like, on par with what we saw with the internet. And as part of my exploration, I went to a Bitcoin conference in 2013, and to me that was it. That was and not only Bitcoin, it was the underlying technology, the blockchain technology of this idea of a ledger that's verified by computers. And I started thinking not only, can it be applied to Bitcoin and currency, but it could be applied to any piece of data, and creates more efficient networks and more peer-to-peer connectivity. I've spent a lot of time in the emerging markets, as you've noted, and so much of financial services has not reached places like Africa, like Latin America, Southeast Asia. And a lot of it is because of the intermediary fees that are required. And so to me, blockchain tech was a way to reduce those intermediary fees and create new business models where we could provide more accessibility to not only financial assets, but healthcare, all like pretty much every industry that was disrupted by the internet, I believe will be disrupted by blockchain tech. And so started Future Perfect Ventures officially in 2014, and we're now investing out of our third fund, very much with the same thesis, except we've seen a lot of developments over the last 8 years, and I feel like the next fund is really where we'll see more widespread adoption of this technology.
Yeah, I think, Martin, what you will see across the board of a lot of folks who started early. So like Jalak mentioned, it's interesting that a number of folks who've been early in the space, like myself, have had emerging markets experience and have seen the difficulties, right? In the Western world, we have the cards, we don't think about it, right? And it works. And when we pay our employees, everything is back office. We don't see it, right? We don't see any of this. When we take loans, relatively, cheap interest rates, but in these other places around the world is not the case. And so I started early in payments in early 2000s in Africa and Latin America, right? When I think at that time, Americans were not even texting. And so we were carving out a broadband spectrum in telecoms and developing mobile payments early. And so I got to see the difficulties of actually dealing in business and what did that mean for a rural population. And then once I sat down, I remember during that time, I was with a group of hackers and really early kind of starters in blockchain space. And that's who gave me the white paper for the Bitcoin white paper. And I read it and I didn't believe it. And I said, is this really possible? This sounds like perfection. But then I read a number of sci-fi books that I really liked and started to interact with folks who were really cutting edge and pretty crazy by, normal standards. And then the second experience that I had that validated for me, so this is early 2000s, and then in kind of middle 2000s, I was at GE. So first I was an entrepreneur in Africa and Latin America, and then I was hired into GE to run their emerging tech. But I tested blockchain technology across the board. So that's early when I brought guys like Lehman and Mance from Hashgraph and Joe Lubin and Vitalik, and a number of these different people. This is 2013 and 14, right? And I said, okay, what is smart contract going to do? What's smart about the smart contract? And then we got to apply it in energy and devices on the edge and wind turbines and 3D manufacturing, right? And treasuries. And that's when you start to see the limitations and possibilities. But I really thought that, as just Jalak said it, it's the next wave of really these validation of trust, right? And when you think about it, maybe not us humans, but machines certainly.
Yeah, I share this. I think also, now seeing that, first of all, that we have still big parts of the world which do not have this legacy system, which we know here in Switzerland or in the US, where many things are not a problem, and that this has to be developed, and probably, there will be a direct jump to modern systems without these systems which are run by intermediaries as we have it here, and lots of the infrastructure will be rebuilt. And maybe what is your opinion?
So I'll just give you kind of a similar background and context as Jalak and Maja have given. I mean, for us, you know, a lot of folks were saying that this new world of blockchain would be similar to what was going on in the internet about 10, 15 years ago. And I think we had a thesis that, you know, if you can find a handful of companies that can help you know, build out the infrastructure around the adoption of crypto and blockchain technology, that you know, that would yield pretty well.
Welcome to DeFi Real. My name is Brian Rose, and this is our brand new program covering.
Was that me?
I don't know.
Maybe, probably, but no worries. Let's go.
Okay.
Let's move on.
Okay.
That's how what happens.
Somebody's
I
learning
saw
something in the
worse
background.
Zoom calls.
Somebody's learning something in the background.
It's a different category. Interesting.
Yeah.
Anyways, yeah. So I mean, yeah, we had kind of come up with this similar thesis that a lot of folks had conviction over the last 3 to 4 years. And you know, I guess at that time it was a little bit difficult for institutional folks to be investing in that space, right? I mean, it still kind of is today. It's getting easier, you know, and I think the folks that had kind of put together gone through the homework of, you know, making sure things are in compliance and stuff like that, to actually successfully allocate in this space and allocate with a reasonable size, you know, have since seen a lot of fruits of that labor, for sure, and we'll probably continue to for the next half decade or so.
Maja and Jalak, I mean, and now I think it was very interesting to see where you see, I mean, first of all, where you're coming from, and also why you believe, or why you start to believe at a very early time in this new infrastructure, which is built based on distributed ledger. So I want to know from you, will we need new protocols? Will we be able to do it on current protocols? And also, where do you invest now? Is it new protocols, infrastructure projects, or is it mostly applications which are based on currently known blockchain protocols?
Well, I think for me, I look at regulation a lot, and I look just because I always thought between the government and kind of public and a private side. So I bring kind of the two perspectives. I was never a true technologist, so I couldn't just really see everything that is just perfect technology, perfect protocol, right? Sure, certain things before I've invested in those, and knowing that they will never go anywhere in the real world. Or it will take a long time for them to go anywhere in the real world because it's political. Examples could be identity protocols, right? But if you look at actually identity and token identity in the last 2-3 months in this bear market, they've actually performed really well. So depends how you're investing, right? So if you're investing just based on tokens and the movement of the tokens, and you know, I look at my identity performance in the last couple months when everything else was down, those things performed really well and I made money there, right? If I look at applications of identity in a real world, it is very political, right? And I think that's one of the sore topics that a lot of people don't like to talk about, but CBDCs are nothing but, you know, a complete traceability of citizens, right? And so people will yell for blockchain and CBDCs, but reality is this is a pure traceability on everything that we do. So I guess it depends. For me, when I'm investing now, I'm investing some pretty interesting things that are pulling in institutional investors. That's interesting to me. There are protocols and mechanisms that will custody the things that really real world needs in order to move further into crypto, to feel safer into crypto, to learn more in crypto, or to scale their own products on these protocols. And then I will opportunistically see, like I did the privacy tokens, and I will see that they actually have performed really well last couple of months, which I've told to a few people and they didn't believe me, but if you actually look at statistics, those are the ones that performed really well. So that's kind of few thoughts based on your question.
Yeah, I'll jump in. So I'm going to go back to the kind of the evolution of any new technology. And if you look at the internet, so we can't have applications until we have the infrastructure, and we certainly saw that. With our first fund, we were heavily investing in infrastructure, and we were an investor and a seed investor in Blockstream. That's been very instrumental in helping build out the Bitcoin blockchain. We were an early investor in blockchain.com, which is one of the largest wallets in the world, and have built out to institutional products. And so we just believe that there was just going to be some core infrastructure that needed to be built out. Certainly Bitcoin and Ethereum were part of that as tokens, but we're primarily an equity investor. Now with our second fund, which we launched in 2017, we started to see, and not in 2017, but post 2017, some clarity around regulations. And as we saw more clarity around regulations, we became more active on the token side and started thinking of that layer 2. And so we invested in the Graph very early, and they're building kind of developer tools to pull data from different blockchains. So we've always believed in a multi-blockchain world. I think there will be different protocols and different blockchains that are used for different use cases. Just like we don't have, one enterprise software company, we're not going to have one protocol that does everything, or one application that does everything. And so, but we are, I'd say, out of Fund 3, very focused on that middleware layer. Is how do you create these developer tools? How do you build upon these protocols in a way where you can scale applications that can reach billions of users? And so we've been very active, pre-NFT boom, and investing in the NFT space, because we view that as kind of some of those. It's really core infrastructure for any asset. A lot has been said about art, but if you look at domain names, emojis, identity, NFTs are a core part of that. And so we have 3 investments, soon to be 5, in the NFT infrastructure space, not necessarily in the NFTs themselves. And so we definitely see, are very interested in any middleware applications that can bring this technology to a wider audience.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. Now, you have already responded a bit of my next question, where I wanted to ask, in what do you prefer to invest? Is it in tokens or is it in equity? And maybe here I would even like to add the question, in 2017, 18, we saw many ICOs, the last few years, but less. Where do you think are we going there? Also, will it come back, the ICOs? Will it be, explain me a bit, now, Jalak, you just mentioned you are focusing more on equity, maybe Maja, maybe Joam also. What is your opinion?
Sure. Yeah, so we've historically focused mainly on the equity component. I think with tokens, it can be a little bit of a challenge to, I want to say the word underwrite, but I don't know if that's the right word, but it's a little bit of a challenge sometimes to fully understand, okay, is this, equity is a little bit low risk, we'll just put it that way, right? With a token that someone may be launching, there's a lot more unanswered questions, right? Mm-hmm. And I guess from a institutional fiduciary standpoint, sometimes it's can get a little bit complicated as to whether you're able to even ask the right questions, let alone get the right answers to those questions, right? So it's rare for us to do any sort of token deal. We've done it, but it's very rare. That's less than 5% of dollars allocated, I think. So well below that. So.
I think when I hear your question, sure, straightforward answer is both. Where I think that the company's really playing with institutional investors, where, as Jalak said, payment companies or things that have a possibility of pulling in millions of people, or when there's institutional in play, larger names, I definitely look more for equity. However, though, for me, crypto has really been interesting because crypto to me is purely a software movement and it doesn't really depend on hardware kind of build out, right? Where kind of internet did. And I know because I was part of a lot of the work that we did in Africa, laying out cables and negotiating that between governments and private sector and building out cell towers, right? I have a firsthand experience of doing that. So when I look at crypto, I think of just purely software movement, and that expands so rapidly. And I think you'd be crazy not to take advantage of that type of investment in that code or in data, or right, something that is open source, because I do think in a lot of instances that will take a lead. And ultimately, I will never forget an experience I had in Africa in some of these meetings where I really understood that the power of software. Power of software is just exponential. And when you're really playing with some technologies that require hardware, it's just much harder investment and much more riskier investment, just in my opinion, right? So I'd say I split my investments in two opportunistically.
Jalak, you want to add something here also?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned that we are taking more token exposure, but when we do, so we're an early stage investor. We're very clear about that. So even if we do take on any token exposure, it's with a long-term view. And often it will be at the pre-sale. If we do any kind of open market buying, it's because we believe in the long term. However, at the end of the day, a lot of these tokens are still trading as speculative assets, and so we're not in the business of tracking these day to day, and that's why we veered more towards equity or pre-sales. When we also get to know the teams, we do the same diligence. We don't, just invest in a random team. I mean, I think what I do on a personal account versus as a fiduciary with the fund are two, very different elements. And at the end of the day, we are fiduciaries to our limited partners and do the diligence that we need to do. And if we can't do that with a particular investment, we don't invest through the fund.
I think this is interesting. I mean, as I told you here, I'm based in Switzerland. We have quite some foundations which manage protocols, and I mean, a foundation is an opposite to an equity-based company. In the end, if you want to increase an ecosystem, you want to take that everyone is participating. You want to build a governance structure which is purely in the interest of the token holder, of the project owners, which is truly decentralized. And I mean, there, of course, we often also start with the company, but in the end, this company will be acquired and merged into the foundation so that there is no conflict of interest between token holders and equity owners. I mean, there could be a conflict of interest. And thinking back, the whole equity company structure, I would say it's a child of industrialization. It was built, I mean, it's like blockchain per se, it's a creation of human beings' mind, which was used to finance huge infrastructure projects in the early 1800s or the late 1700s. And I mean, now we go also into another time where, it's much more easier to access through internet, through digitalization, everyone. And there, I think the token aspect, it's very interesting. It's easy. So in the end, we will see what will happen in the course of the next few decades. Will the equity model still be the preliminary model for our economy, or will it be the token model? I think that's an interesting question, but I mean, I don't have any response for it. It's just we will see, and but in the end, for sure, it's important that now, where these new nets are created, that we have an equal and very transparent share, and probably the token is a very simple and effective mean to create such an environment and a net. So
totally agree. I mean, I think this is going to be transformative for businesses and the way businesses are structured and the way people work, and everything. I think we're in a very transitional phase with a lot of speculation, and so once we start to see projects really take hold that stay true to the ethos of decentralization, and I think we're going to see that over the next few years, that will be when the transformation really occurs. I think it's inevitable, but like you said, the time frame is the question mark.
Yeah. Perfect. So maybe something a bit more specific about your companies. Could you tell me how big your portfolio is, how much capital you invest typically per year or in your funds? Jalak, you're already at your third fund, but Maja and Johan, please also let me know how what's the capital you have to deploy?
Sure, I can go. We don't have specific capital, that we are very opportunistic depending. So for example, two opportunities that I'm looking at the moment. One is we'll go as high as $1 million and as low as $10,000. It really depends. Sometimes I will play and I will say, okay, if I do believe kind of something, but maybe haven't had the full-on due diligence and spend some time, and I kind of want to place a bet on it and willing to lose, right? It would be 10 to 30K, and I'll say, okay, this is kind of I'll gamble in a sense, right? Because I think, as you just said correctly, we don't know if some of this is going to work, right? Even some of the stuff that you think should work, right? Best step doesn't win, right? It really depends on so many things. And I think particularly now in crypto, really depends which type of institutions you've gone in front of, what type of data that you have, who are you going to partner? What is the utility of something you're going to do, right? And then you look at some tokens that have zero utility, right? But have made us money, and just sometimes there is no pattern to some extent. What I do look at is the team. I look at the code, and I look at the kind of go to market, and do I think that this is something that the market will want to extend? Is it short term or long term? There's also that. And there are things that I look at in China, but then I say to myself, okay, well, if I invest in this, do I actually think it's going to touch the Chinese government, and how do I play with that? Even if I invest in companies that are in the West, I really look at regulation too, and I don't play with something that is not going to withstand the regulation, right? One of the biggest investments we've made is a reserve token with a couple of million, and Peter Thiel is invested in that. We're #1 app in Venezuela now. It's a phenomenal project. But for example, for that project, we can't hire enough of developers. Our demand is so high. The only reason we can't grow is or they can't grow is because we can't hire enough of customer service, and we need a lot of local support. So there is some of that too. You can see projects, but there's a great need, or lots of people will go to Africa, or I can hear a lot of these younger kids now going to Africa and Latin America saying, oh my God, there's all these things that you can do. Reality is, to scale that in these places is a whole different ballgame, right? And so you can have a perfect tool and go to market and a need, exists to make you millions and billions of dollars, but reality is scaling that, so when I'm investing, I really look at kind of the reality of a situation, and we run through a strategy, we run through guys that are on the ground, what is the step-by-step kind of growth. But yeah, checks are anywhere from that size.
Very interesting. I think, I mean, just now it's not in my questions here, but you mentioned it twice. And so I would like to take a few minutes also on this subject about regulation. And I'm also very much a believer, I mean, there are many, let's say, kids on the block, they think everything is possible, you can do whatever, and it's great. And you also mentioned the privacy coins, etc., which are, now, one thing is the current regulation, and I think what is even more important is to try to foresee future regulation, because if you invest into a project, it's not about now, it's much more about how will the regulation be in 2, 3, 5 years. In my opinion, I mean, we have to follow basically the regulation approach, which is also given for traditional means of, let's say, transfer or assets or security or whatever. But then there is another trend. I mean, we have very diverse, different approaches from different countries. I mean, as we see now, obviously Nigeria, Venezuela, maybe China has a different approach at regulation as Switzerland, UK, Europe, or the US have. So maybe also here, I just wanted to know where do you think? I mean, now regarding regulation, regulatory compliance, where do we go, and what would you think is important? I mean, still, and I think this is sorry that me as moderator, I do a bit too many claims maybe here, and I would more like need your opinion than my own, but still, how do you see things developing? What do you expect?
Yeah, I think, and Jalak also, I know, and have both. I know from Jalak because I know her. I mean, definitely has a lot of experience here. But from what I've seen in the government and being a lawyer myself, I mean, look, under the classic Howey test, right? When offers where you're selling tokens in the pre-network phase, right, before launching the actual network, are likely securities, right? And so if I start from that basic premise as a lawyer, I look at that and I look everything through that lens. And actually, if you look at a lot of funds now recently, they've all have beefed up on regulators and people that have regulatory experience and legal experience, because yes, regulation is heavy. Also, I would argue that technology sometimes, well, not sometimes, all the time, is probably ahead of regulation, right? And business and making money and all of that, right? Just like mining was in 80s and hedge funds and everything else, right? They pushed the regulation to regulate that. So I do see the same thing happening here. But you're right, Martin. I think a lot of countries are going to have a slightly different approach. I do think that SEC has a long arm, and that a lot of that will come from the SEC, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, or who looks at it from which country. I definitely look at it, and I do think that we've got another probably 1.5 to 2 years until regulation clamps down. What's interesting is when I look at some of the stuff that guys like Andreessen Horowitz have invested in, or Polychain Capital, they invest in a lot of decentralized and a lot of DeFi and a lot of NFTs. And DeFi currently, if I look at the coders and projects, they're all hurrying and really in a lot of hurry to make systems and make networks so big that the regulation will have a hard time catching up. That's kind of what I'm seeing. I don't know what's going to happen. but I do think that obviously it is going to be there, and I think it's kind of normal, particularly in the US, right? And is that a good thing? I actually do think to some extent it is a good thing, because most crypto enthusiasts will argue and say, we don't need government in the current system. Okay, I started in this industry because I was kind of in between and a bit, naive or idealistic or, anti-establishment. But reality is that there are people, and money makes people greedy. And so once crypto bros get really wealthy, then they want to take power in their own hands, right? Well, what happens then is that they can literally scam a lot of people, like it happens in a lot of these ICOs and tokens and everything else. So do you need, it's a double-edged sword. We want a decentralized system, and somebody will argue, well, the system and the code and perfect math will sort itself out. I'm not really sure that's the case. So I'll pause there.
Maybe Jalak, I think it's an interesting topic. What's your view on this? I mean, or you agree, or do you agree fully with that, or you have something to add here?
Yeah, I mean, I'll quickly kind of add on. I mean, look, it's 100%. Well, I'm going to say 99, but we know for a fact that this space is it's going to be filled with let's call it dangerous ideas that may be somewhat scammy and whatnot. I mean, we've seen that already over the last 3 to 5 years, and it'll continue to happen just out of unfortunate people just trying to take advantage of the excitement and hype. And so the reality is that the regulation and stuff like that will definitely come. I mean, I don't think anybody can or even tries to dispute it. Now, what we've seen working pretty well, and it's not done yet, is a lot of the leading companies in the space, I think, have it's kind of like Maja just said, back in the day, when hedge funds and mining companies, et cetera, were all kind of sourcing or we're kind of helping build out the regulatory environment that they are willing to play in. But it's also, they're kind of doing that today, right? And so what that does is, you've got a lot of the large name companies, I mean, obviously everybody knows Coinbase, BlockFi, Binance, all the Strike, Zap payments and stuff like that. A lot of what they try to do is say, hey, look, here's how we want to operate, right? You tell us, Mr. SEC, Mr. Government, whoever, whichever regulating entity it is, how can we make sure that what we're doing is okay? Right. And what happens is the folks in government then are able to take, are able to learn, hey, look, here's what, even though this sounds a little scary, what they're doing is not, let's call it unethical or scammy or something like that. Right. And having that kind of very close relationship amongst especially the larger companies in the space, I think that makes it a lot easier for the next, 2 to 3 decades. And a lot of the smaller companies that are, may not have that sort of pull to pick up the phone and call someone at the, at various regulatory bodies and things like that. So.
Good. Yeah. I think also, I mean, in the end, I hope there are 2 approaches. One is to make the system fair and just, and to protect the participant. And I think this is a very good motivation also to regulate. I think this is absolutely important. And if we see in general what happens in tech with these huge companies, I think it's very important, also to have, not build monopolies. And but on the other hand, I think one risk is also that, there, of course, the whole space is also huge competition for current players. And I mean, let's hope that not, let's say, all intermediaries, they will just make it impossible to build a new system. We also have known these kind of systems where just the old one, push it, just don't want to allow new participant to enter into the market. And this, of course, and we saw it in many countries who followed this approach in all regions, or in some regions in the world, they were then, after a few decades, they're just behind because there is no innovation possible anymore. Now, coming back again, leaving now this regulation topic, I wanted to ask you, if you invest in projects, do you prefer to act as a lead investor, or do you prefer being a co-investor?
Co-investor for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
We'll do both. One of the reasons I launched Future Perfect was that I thought there were a lot of aspects of the venture capital model that were broken and not necessarily staying ahead, which is ahead of the times, which is what ironically VC is supposed to do. But I've believed for a long time that this purely ownership driven investing is going to go away. We're going to see that certainly with tokens and tokenization. But so that follows with us, being flexible. We come across very early stage projects that we may have certain expertise in, and this happens a lot in the emerging markets where it's very hard for some of these teams to find investors that know their markets, that know crypto, that know, and we'll step up and price around and lead, and we're happy to do that. We also believe in strong syndicates and being involved, with other great co-investors. So it really depends on the situation. I mean, we're very cognizant of, leading does take time, and I'd say we do the same amount of diligence, but there is definitely more effort that goes into leading. And so we do, we balance that with the bandwidth we have on the team.
And then for us, it's kind of similar to what Jalak had just said. I mean, look, we kind of take it case by case. I'd say we do have a little bit of a preference to lead where we can, but sometimes it makes sense for other groups to do it, and we just want. I mean, if there's an opportunity that's interesting, and we're still bullish on it, it's not necessarily a deal breaker, right?
So next question: How do startups find you? Do they approach you, or do you have a systematic approach to scan the environment? How do you find your investment targets?
First, I mean, it's just been natural. I mean, if I go through my inbox from early days, people just kind of know you. The space has grown since 2010 a lot, right? So in 2010, when it was just kind of a handful of projects we were all investing in. But then, people either find you, or you find people, you go specifically hunting. I know that, right? I was looking for somebody who's gonna provide kind of certain things for this space, and you just ask around in your network, and you have great network, as I said earlier, in our private chat, that Jalak does this really amazing group of women that we connect with that are really powerful in the space. And I have the same network, and there's a gentleman called Gabriel Abed who has been really early in the space, who he has a group that is just pretty much all old G's in this space, anybody that has created a protocol. So you just kind of have your network, and people share also in the space. It's really interesting. People just say to you, hey, I had a call the other day with somebody who's quite known in the space, and hey, I thought you would love this project. Do you want to invest with us? And it's just it's very organic and very natural, and you're nice to people, and chances are people are nice back, and you always get these opportunities. And it's what's fascinating to me to this day is that I've had so much money in and out of my account without any contracts in the beginning. Just trust people. I had so much ETH back and forth, and there's so many of these guys, a lot of money, and you just kind of trust people along the way, and it's really fascinating, right? That's that trust, and that's that. I think earlier, Jalak was saying why she invested in blockchain. That's the reason, right? I mean, I put in so much money in some of these projects. I remember sending it to some of these dudes that I've never met, just over the internet, and with these early projects of, Hobby Exchange and, EOS protocol in the beginning, and that and this, right? And it just, you just kind of trust, and things come back, which is fascinating.
It's nice to hear that. Yeah. Maybe Jalak and Oam.
Okay, remind me of the question.
The question is, how do we find you if we want to?
Oh, right. Okay. The deal flow. Yeah, I'm going to echo what Maja said about, networks, and especially, if you've been in the space for a while, it's people know what your thesis is, what you're, particularly interested in investing in. And really entrepreneurs, they reach out, but I've always done proactive outreach, because sometimes the best entrepreneurs aren't raising or don't need to raise, and I'd say we do both. It's our network bringing things to us, entrepreneurs bringing things to us directly, and me doing outreach. And the last two deals, the ones that are in process and about to close, were actually from outreach that I did. As I try to set aside one full day a week to just read, and it's become harder and harder as the space has grown and our portfolio has grown, but I think it's an important part of because this is such a fast growing industry, and we do want to stay ahead, to be able to absorb and think about where things are headed next, and finding those teams in a proactive way.
Actually, just on that one, Martin, just before, if I can jump in, that's such a good point on the space. It's like two different worlds post-COVID, right? Because we haven't seen everybody. Yeah, you're in touch with people, but it's very different. We had so many conferences we were attending, right? I remember from 2011 to, 19, 20, it was just you invested in the spot in these conferences, right? You just kind of did your thing. And then it was COVID, and then post-COVID now, what's interesting is projects that have come across my desk in the last couple of days. It's fascinating. Before, I would definitely look for scalability and less at the team and how they're gonna launch it. Now it's more, wow, part of the team is X Binance, X Coinbase, X this, right? So there's this already a time that has passed of experience of some of these folks who have now moved on to more mature projects. And so you kind of look at the backgrounds of the people, where before I didn't even care. Were you a flower shop owner, right? And you married with the tech guy and you created a great thing, right? I just invest. But now I actually pay more attention. Who is in the team, because it's also getting harder, right? It's going to get harder. There'll be a lot of M&A in the space, and a lot of projects will fail too, right? So that's just something that inspired me by what Jalak said.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, I mean, for me, it's kind of the same thing. I mean, looking at it's a small community. There's a reason I was in Miami about 6 hours ago, and it's like, I mean, it's in Jalak's there, like half of the society in the space is there now. It's a small world, and there's a lot of sharing that goes on whenever there might be some like-minded deals that people are looking for. And then, I mean, I'm surprised none of us said Twitter, but I'm just kidding. But yeah, people are throwing around ideas on the internet all the time, and occasionally, if you see something that's interesting, it's very easy as a simple couple cold emails. If it's a space that we're actually kind of hunting for some activity in or something like that. So yeah, I mean, I think it's a uniform answer that every person in this space would probably give, but the reality is it's just, it is, that's exactly accurate. So
Thank you.
I remember one of the biggest things, I don't know, Jalak, if that's where I actually met you in the beginning. It was like 17, 18. David Namdar was a partner at Galaxy, and he's the one that actually started it at Galaxy Ventures. He actually brought so many people for these happy hours once a week. And I swear to you, I invested in 80% of those projects that were in that room, right? It's just because there were people there, and he created that. And he invited everybody from Wax to, to mining guys, Bitfury guys, and it was just really early, and everybody was in the room. Right now, it's just getting a little bit bigger. But I just remember that.
Yeah. Those were fun meetups.
They were in New York, or where did you do this
New
meeting?
York, yeah. David
New
did
York.
them in New York Galaxy's office. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
really early. Yeah.
Great. So another question: in which regions of the world do you invest?
Oh, I mean, I've lived 10 years in Latin America and Africa. I understand both markets really well. Yeah, so I mean, all over. I don't really have a bias.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So could be Switzerland, could be Europe, could be Asia, could be.
Yeah. All of them. Yeah.
For us, I mean, historically, it's mainly been in the U.S., but that's not necessarily because of any sort of biases. I think now it's a lot easier to understand what's going on in other parts of the world. How this space has evolved over the last 2.5 to 3 years. And before, when we going back to that regulation topic that we were just on about 5-10 minutes ago, it was a lot easier to just understand what's going on in your own backyard. Whereas now, I guess people you can get a little bit more knowledge about what's going on. Okay, if we're investing in a project out in Europe, what's the regulatory environment looking like it out there versus Asia or something like that. So, I mean, our last deal was a company in Europe, right? I mean, it was a significant size check actually for us. So now we're kind of grown agnostic. In fact, I would say we're probably even hunting for more stuff outside of the U.S. Now. I mean, with Latin America, Pan Asia, Middle East, whatever is interesting. So.
Yeah, another reason I started FPV was that I thought that early stage investing had to go global, and that was actually a very radical idea in 2013 and 14. Most VCs stayed within their backyard, and I moved from the Valley to New York in 2004, and I remember people, you didn't see people funds from the Valley in New York until about like 2010, and then you'd run into them on the streets of Soho, and so that was a radical departure. And I think COVID has really shown that. COVID plus just the fact that innovation, this is open source, innovation's happening everywhere. There's a lot of growth happening outside of the US, and there are regulations that create different opportunities in different places. And so we have always, we were an early investor in BitPesa in Nairobi. I happen to have been born there. And so I'm very kind of comfortable with the African continent. I'm also have a lot of experience investing in India. We've invested there. We've invested in the Philippines, in Mexico. So we're global, and I've kind of built those networks through the course of my career, like Maja has done, and so it's a very natural kind of fit to look globally, and a real, I'd say, competitive advantage to be able to do that and offer those networks to the entrepreneurs.
Perfect. So I have another question regarding your investment targets. I put two questions together. First, what product are you looking for? What's the criteria for the product? And then I think we also tangled it already a bit before. What qualities of the team are you looking for?
When you say product, what do you mean? Like, is there something specific that we are looking at in terms of a product?
Could be something specific, but doesn't need to be. Can also be a quality of a product, like disruption potential. Could also be specific. I don't know. It's an open question.
Yeah, I think for me has been for sure team, credibility of a team. I do like to do some DD on people, just in terms of credibility, values, morals. It's really important. As I said earlier, I've transferred a lot of money. People have entrusted me with a lot of money. So that's really important. Your reputation is your currency, and I've never messed around with that. So I do think that to me is key when I look at the team. Are they reliable? I've only had 2 instances in crypto where that's not been the case, unfortunately. But I was lucky enough. Other people have had others. So I think what's also interesting in this industry is that people will call you out if something happens, right? Much faster. So that's a good thing. But the quality of teams, for sure. Technology and disruption, yes. But again, it can be the best disruption and best tech. Doesn't necessarily mean it would be a great investment. So I think it's a combination of things. It's the go-to-market, right? I mean, if I look at some of the autonomous vehicles or some of the AI stuff, right? Phenomenal, right? Mind-blowing, mind-boggling, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's a short-term investment. Sometimes it's 10-year to 15-year horizon these things will come about. I'm actually heavily now looking at CRISPR. I'm getting my final certification from Harvard on CRISPR and going to take the test, probably going to fail it first time. But that's something that's really fascinating to me with blockchain and sequencing of the cells and DNA and everything. Pharmaceuticals and everything to do with that. I'm kind of looking at that area at the moment heavily. But again, there's such amazing code and amazing technology. For example, one of the amazing technologies we invested in heavily is Mina protocol, O1 Labs, phenomenal project. But how is it doing right now, right? Not so well in terms of tokens. How is it doing in terms of team quality? One of the best team qualities out there. Is it going to win? I don't know. Did I put my money because I thought the team was fantastic and code was fantastic? Yes. Go to market long term. So what do I mean by long term? Probably next 2 to 5 years, right? To some people that could be long term. But that's kind of how I would answer that question.
Yeah, and to add to that, a lot what I see missing in some of the teams that I talk to is context of what's been tried before. There are a lot of, the great thing about the sector is there's so much energy, a lot of new entrants, people thinking creatively about how this technology can be used, but there is a lot of history. I say, 1 week in crypto is equivalent to 10 years in anything else. And I think unless you are in the sector, you don't really, you don't appreciate that. And in terms of how quickly things develop, how quickly things start and fail or start and, succeed or then go sideways. And so that kind of velocity and that appreciation of what's been tried. And so much of what I see these days has already been tried. Now, the timing is likely to be right this time around, or more likely to be right. But when entrepreneurs don't have the context, when I, mention a company that, tried this even just 2 years ago, which is not that long ago, and there's no context around that, I find that worrisome. So that, and that's really important, I think. And then the other is resiliency. And this is maybe a little bit less important. It's always important in an entrepreneur, but it was absolutely 100% essential. I started investing in the sector during a crypto winter, like post Mt. Gox. That's actually when I thought the opportunity, was, but that required, a lot of resiliency for entrepreneurs to get started during that time. Now we've seen several cycles, so I'd say it becomes less risky every cycle when you see that. But these entrepreneurs like Peter Smith from blockchain, Adam from Blockstream, like all these companies, Elizabeth from BitPesa, they were there building through several crypto winters, several cycles, and that, that's just so key to a sector that's new. And the other is, you know, and I try to do this as an investor, is just, you can't get caught up in FOMO, you know, like you just can't. And that's, you know, a lot of times I get asked, you know, why, you know, what's made the fund successful, and I'd say that is a key, and you have to be willing to go out there and be, you know, everyone likes to think they're contrarian, you know, and but you have to, and even as an entrepreneur, you have to believe, you know, you have to take information from the market and you know when to evolve your model, but you also cannot get too worried about what other people are doing or too concerned, and stay true to your vision for the long term. So, you know, that's different if you're a speculative investor or you're a hedge fund. You know, I'd say it's a whole different model, but in early stage investing and what teams and characteristics we look for, those are the essential ones.
And I'll kind of like cap that off. So definitely what they both kind of described as well. But I think to answer your question, Martin, I think you had asked about products and the team. Is that right? Just to kind of refresh my mind. Yeah. So on the product side, I think for us, the way that we're looking at the world, there's probably two core categories that, and there's more than this, but two core that we like to look at, right? One is anything that is building infrastructure around the adoption of blockchain. So what that means is, you know, and my favorite example of this is, you know, more home equity lines of credit, you know, mortgage refinancing, stuff like that used to take, you know, 60 to 90 days. Now it can be done in, you know, 3 to 5 days using blockchain technology with a couple. There's a couple names out there, but, you know, we've invested in a company called Figure that's done that pretty well, right? And so what it does is it takes away the sort of friction of you know, there's a hefty amount of cost and fees associated with it, several middlemen, and you can basically save a significant amount of time and money. And whenever any sort of space where we see that as an opportunity, somewhere where we'd love to, you know, at least evaluate the you know, allocating into. And the other one is driving the adoption of crypto ownership as an asset, not necessarily blockchain, right? So that's, you know, and that's an easy one. I think everybody talks about those two categories pretty generally nowadays, but you know, anything that's enabling an institutional pension fund manager to hold Bitcoin on the balance sheet, or even, you know, a random person that own even $100 worth of Bitcoin as an investment of, you know, their personal net worth. There's several companies building several products and services out there. You know, obviously a handful of them will be super successful, a handful of them will not. So those are, you know, to answer your question on the product side, that's kind of what we look for at a core. And then, I mean, on the team side, it's, you know, Maja and Jalak had kind of covered it, right? I mean, look, you always want to look for folks that have done something similar in that space, and maybe, you know, hey, look, we used to build financial products on Wall Street for, you know, for the foreign exchange desk, and now we want to bring it over to crypto. Well, you know, those two worlds are a little bit different, but they're also kind of they're similar, right? So you're more likely to have a success with someone that's done this with a different asset class as opposed to, you know, someone that used to, you know, be in the world of or be in a completely different world. I mean, I can't give you a good example of that, but and generally speaking, the way that have found success in finding that is, you know, your first 2 or 3 conversations, they don't necessarily have to be interrogative, right? You don't have to walk in and ask a million questions about the company. It can be more like a brainstorming session. And that can give you a good indication of, hey, is this the right team that's actually going to be able to scale this from, you know, a business with 7 employees to 700, right? So those are the kind of things that we look out for, because it's, you know, everybody knows it's a challenge, but, you know, it's hard to kind of look for the diamond in the rough in that case. So.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, I think we have a few more minutes. So I would like to ask you my last question, and then maybe I do a little last word from my side, and then I let you say also bye-bye to our public. My question to you, what do you love most being an investor in the blockchain space?
I love the creativity. People that I meet, just fascinating. Some of the smartest people I met, I think, have been in the space. Just really, I also maybe also that we all like to feel important, right? That's kind of part of a human DNA. And when you have some of these younger folks who are just brilliant in the ways that, you know, I will personally never be in terms of code and everything else, and then you help them really scale something, or help them connect the dots in strategy or go to market, and execution, hiring the right people. Just really, that's kind of just, even now talking about it, you know, I'm getting goosebumps because you're helping somebody build a company and helping somebody build their dream. You know, we all, I think, two most powerful words in human existence are love and hope. And I think we all, you know, with this technology, I always hope that we can have, as I think Jalak said in the beginning, can have a better world. And I think Oam said there is always a possibility of going the sideways. And I unfortunately think we might be going into 1984 Orwell to some extent. Some extent not. Is that soon? I don't know. But I certainly love the thrill. I love, personally, I love sci-fi. And I think this just gives me a creativity in my mind and constantly something to read and learn. I'm never the smartest person in the room, and that's just so humbling. So, yeah.
Very interesting.
Go ahead, Joel. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's all of those things. And I just feel like we're just so fortunate to be part of something that is transformative and will change the world. And now the question is, how exactly is it going to change the world, and how is this technology going to be used? But to be in the early stages of forming that and partnering with teams that are doing that is, you know, I did it earlier in my career through when I was at Intel, you know, and with the internet, but that was much earlier in my career. And I actually think this is way more global, way more transformative, enabled by what was all done through, you know, the pipes and the infrastructure and the business models that came out of the internet. But you know, I feel like it's all of my life's works and passion, all in the, you know, it's people. You know, before I started the third fund, people said, "Are you going to retire?" And I was like, "Are you kidding? We're just getting started. We're just getting into the meat of this." And to see so many brilliant minds, you know, working on the future, and what you mentioned with the equity versus tokenization, and you know, I mean, hopefully we'll have different ways of running businesses that are more equitable, that where more people can participate in the ownership and create more value out of all of that. And that's the world I want to see. I don't, you know, we'll see what if and when that actually happens, but that's what drives me every single day. Yeah, and it hopefully is, you know, keeps me young to be around all these minds.
Perfect. Yeah,
I don't need to invest in longevity, hopefully.
And to add to that, right? I mean, obviously, there's definitely a fun and exciting piece of being a part of, you know, something that may have a significant amount of global change and whatnot. And then the other piece of this is it's just a lot of fun, right? I mean, like it's and I know that sounds like the most blanket answer ever, but the reality is whenever you see, okay, 2.5 years ago, you know, we had invested in a business that had, let's call it 20 to 30 employees, something like that. Now today they have 700 on their way to 800, right? I mean, it's you know, every month you go back and, you know, you have an update of some sort, and it's like, oh, you know, X, Y, and Z is now happening. And then, you know, X, Y, and Z again is now happening, right? It's then before you know it, I mean, you know, 2 years have gone by, 3 years have gone by, and it's like, you know, you don't even remember blinking, right? And obviously this happens a lot in the venture space, but I think right now, because of kind of the heavy amount of excitement and money flowing into, you know, crypto and blockchain in specific, you know, we're seeing a little bit higher of a frequency of that than we would have if, you know, we were in a different niche, right? So I think those are kind of two pieces of it.
Yeah, I think this was very interesting, this discussion. And I mean, for me also, I believe that digitalization is really a big thing. Huh? It's comparable to the steam machine, in my opinion. Huh? The steam machine was the basis for the last 250 years of development on our planet, with advantages and what we see currently now, many disadvantages, destroying our planet. I mean, not yet destroying, don't be too alarmist, but still causing lots of harm. And I believe that digitalization is also possibly the biggest invention for the next 200, 300 years. Lots of blocks will be played in, but still the basis is what we have seen here. And we as a generation, we were, the ones, we had this privilege to be born in these times, which maybe every 1,000 or every few hundred years happens, and now we are here at the forefront and able to shape this. And I think this is a huge privilege which we should use. And I really love to see how that's my impression, how you imagine the future. And now, ask what do we have to do now to get there where we want to see our future. And I mean, Maja mentioned it, there are many risks because I mean, digitalization means also traceability of everything. I mean, I grew up in a time where basically you could do whatever you wanted. If you were if you were not caught in the moment, then it was good. And now, if you see now, I mean, you have traces everywhere, and basically it's impossible to be anonymous. And this, of course, there are huge risks. We have these huge companies who control the digital space now, and I think. And I hope that blockchain technology will enable and help us also to bring back the power, to the people, and not being just instruments of or large organizations and governments. And I mean, I want to give you the last word from my side. I want to say, I mean, it was really great to have you here. I'm also very proud, to have with Jalak and Maja now a majority of our lecturers who are female. And I think you gave us all a very inspiring and great example of the new way of business. And thank you very much. And I wish you all success.
Thank you so much for having us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.